Hey everyone, it's James and
James.
previous we were talking about the whole like the process of looking for a home and all that good stuff, right? Now we're talking about once we're in contract, what happens. So when a client's offers is accepted, what's the next step?
So, depending on any contingencies that are in the contract, typically there's going to be an inspection. We always recommend that our buying clients, ask for an inspection and then conduct that inspection. So, typically there's going to be a 10-day or less time window to get that inspection done and get it reviewed and respond back to the seller with either we pass inspection, we passed some of the inspection and we're asking for a modification to either some repairs or purchase price. And in some cases, the contract just goes completely out the window because the property's in such disrepair that the buyer just wants to back out. And if they do, obviously, they have the contingency there for that reason, so they can get out without losing their earnest money. The next step, which is we respond to the seller's agent or listing agent based upon the information that they've asked for us to send them, because now that the contract language has changed to a certain degree, usually you could just send the entire report saying, hey, we want you to fix this, this, and this. Maybe hopefully everything works out, and then we move on now from the inspection piece to getting back to you, the lender.
So then we get the disclosure sent out to the client to sign, and there's a 3-day period where we need to get those disclosures out and signed, right? Because there's an intent to proceed, there's the rate lock information, and all that stuff is pretty much it's an initial disclosure, right? So you have the initial fees.
Okay.
And then once the appraisal is ordered, we get that confirmation and then we reach out or we send that information to you and the client so you guys have a heads up on when to anticipate that's going to come back. A lot of times what happens is once we go into contract, it's a third parties that are the time, right? It's the
Okay.
inspection, the appraiser,
Oh, okay.
the title and escrow company getting the information because there's like a background check that they send out. For example, one of the forms is where have you lived in the past 10 years?
So thinking about the appraisal, is that
Mhm.
an expense that the buyer has to pay out of their pocket, or is that something that's rolled into their actual closing costs?
No, the appraisal fees now are upfront. So a link goes out to the client to pay via credit card. So there's a link, they put in their credit card information or debit card, and it gets paid.
Mhm.
But when you pay through the link, then when we get to that point of closing, you'll see paid outside of closing.
And then when we talked about earnest money earlier in the last video and this one as well, is the earnest money applied to the
Yeah,
loan?
so we see the earnest money amount. Let's say it's $5,000.
Okay.
So then what we do is we paper trail the where those funds came from. Typically, let's say it's a wire, right? They wired the money,
Hmm.
so we get that paper trail. Okay, it came out of the bank account. Here's the date it came out. Here's the wire information, and then we get confirmation from the escrow company that they received it. Typically, let's say you need $100,000 to close. Well, we take the earnest money of 5,000, subtract it. Now you only need 95, right?
And then when it comes to the appraisal, do you have any input into who's being hired to do the appraisal?
We go through it's a third party vendor, so it's an appraisal servicing
Okay.
department. So when we ask for the appraisal to be ordered, that goes to another department. Then they go through a roster or a list of appraisers, and we put in the submission, and then it's kind of like what
Hmm.
appraiser has time to go out and do that. It's all about their schedule, right? So then here we go
Right.
back to it's a third party thing. Like we don't have
Yeah.
control of somebody else's business. There's times where we'll ask for a rush, and that is a cost, right?
Got it.
But if it's just your standard appraisal fee, we put it in, it goes to the vendor. The vendor puts out the request, an appraiser goes through and goes, yeah, I'll take it. And then we get confirmation that it's been accepted and then what date they anticipate to go out and look at the home.
So you have conventional, FHA, VA, and then USDA, correct?
Oh, I heard VA appraisals take longer to do.
Okay.
And I've never, in my 15 years of being a loan officer, I've never had that happen. I've
Hmm.
heard about it, but it's
Okay.
never been my own experience. And I always say, I'm like,
Sure.
no, it's about the
Yeah,
same.
because I mean, you and I are both in the same boat here because it's a third
Mm-hmm.
party service. I'm
Mm-hmm.
waiting on basically. It seems like the public thinks I'm waiting on you, but you're waiting
Right.
on them.
You're right.
Is there a set like drop dead date that they have to be back by so we can
There
tell?
is, but the order, like for VA, there is a timeline that the appraiser has to go out there and get the report back to us in a timely manner, right? Right. So we're all
Yeah,
constantly like, when are you going to be out there? Where are you going to be? And sometimes the
yeah.
appraiser, like an appointment gets canceled or something, and they can get in there earlier. But there is a timeline.
So speaking of appraisal, that's like assumption that the person is going to go to the home and look at it for
Hmm.
the purpose of verifying the value.
Right. An inspection is not required necessarily on all transactions.
Okay.
VA does require certain inspections to be
Like
done,
hmm.
mold inspection, pest inspections,
Oh,
right?
okay. Got it.
It also depends on VA if it's on a septic or if it's a well. So if it's on a well, they want the water tested. They want to make sure there's enough
Uh,
pressure in the pump to
I see.
supply the home, right? Home inspection is it's an apples and oranges thing with an appraisal,
Hmm.
right? Because the
Okay.
appraisal is just for the value, right? And the inspection's
Yeah,
the condition, right?
I
Now,
see.
they do kind of go together because if the appraiser goes out there and they see a tarp on the roof, they're gonna probably say, "We probably should get a home like a roof inspector out here, right?
Hmm.
Know what's the value of the home? Is it in good condition? Do the lights go on? Does the water go on? Hey, make sure the water's on and the lights are on because the appraiser will go
Mm,
to a light switch, turn it on and off, and then go to the faucet and turn it on and off just to make sure, right? They're not
got it.
testing the water, not testing electrical. They're just making sure that it's supplied with water and electricity. But if the appraiser sees something that's obvious, like there's a hole in the floor, like the ceiling, there's water leaking, they're gonna then condition as not as is, but to be completed.
Right.
When we get it back, I'm like, is it as is? Is it as is? And I see, oh,
Yeah.
to be completed. And I'm like, okay, now we need those things to be fixed. And then we have to send out another request and then that same appraiser to go back out again to make sure that it's been done. One of the main reasons for an appraiser to have to go back out, which we've educated people throughout the years, is the hot water tank straps, right?
The earthquake
That's
straps,
like,
right?
yeah, that's
Yeah.
one of the big pet peeves of mine. I'm like, when you go look at a home, make sure that those straps are on that water tank because that could cost you $150 more there. And we all know straps are like $30 at Home Depot. Then you're just adding time on the closing, right? And then you're like, oh, how long is it going to take for the appraiser to get back out there? With me, I'm always getting that email. It's been accepted. This is the date and time. This is that the inspection is going to happen for the appraisal, and then here's when they anticipate that report coming back to us. And I've heard people go, I don't know what's going on with the appraisal. I don't. I'm like, well, there's lack of communication there because I get an email.
Uh-huh.
I had a realtor email me the other week, and she's like, "Hey James, I have a client. They're buying. I don't even honestly if it was a buyer or seller, but she was concerned about the appraisal, and
Sure.
the concern is there was peeling paint, right? And
Okay.
then there was wood rot, and then there was, and I'm like, so my answer, because I don't know, I don't know the house, it's a general question to me, right? But I was like, well,
Right.
depending on where the paint is and how much paint's peeling,
Uh-huh.
I mean, you talking about this much, you talking about like the whole wall, right? So it's like,
Yeah.
it all depends. But VA, if there's peeling anything, they're going to ask to
Yeah.
have that painted, right? I kind of use the analogy. I was like, okay, if you were to sell a car and you knew there was a tire leak in that tire, like one of the tires was leaking, would you fix the tire before you sold it? If somebody said no, then I question their integrity.
Right.
And then as a buyer, if you knew there was a leaking, if the tire, that same tire was leaking, would you buy the car or would you have the seller fix the tire, right? Kind of look at it as with a house, right? If you know there's a leaking roof, you should fix it if you're going to sell it. If you knew there was a leaking roof as a buyer, you should ask to have it fixed. If my brother came to me and he said, "Hey, James, I want to buy a car." I'm like, "Okay, let's go look at it." And then he pulls up, or not even pulls up, but we go to look at the car and there's no wheels on the car. I'm not
Right.
loaning him money to buy that car, right? He
Right.
can't even use the
Right.
car. how are you going to pay me back if you can't get to work in that car?
There.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and this is the value. I mean, this is why we do this. We're trying to help the buying and selling community understand how this all works together.
Right.
So,
We're kind
what's
of
next?
filling in the gaps of if there's anything that we need. A lot typically what you're going to need is always keep your pay stubs. Depending on when we did the pre-approval, right? If a couple months have gone by, we need most recent past 30 days and then
Pay
also
stub.
bank statements just to make sure you still have those funds for closing and then we're also working with the insurance company if there's homeowners once we get the appraisal back, then we're like, okay, now you need to get an insurance quote or then we're waiting for that insurance binder to come back. But we don't know until we get the appraisal report back, right? So there's all these moving parts going on behind the
Right.
scenes with us that I'm like, people are like, what's taking so? I'm like, well, I'm waiting for your insurance guy to get back to me. Like,
Right.
what do you want me to do?
And this is why where we all come together, working together, because I
Mhm.
know I'm telling the buyer, just be calm, be patient, don't buy anything, don't do anything
Right.
crazy,
Don't
don't
open
quit
any
your
new credit
job.
card. Yeah.
Mhm.
Head. If you're gonna do all that, contact us first before you do it. I had a client right like 2 days before signing call me, go, James, is it okay if I go to they're at Sears? I don't even know they're still around anymore, but they're at Sears and they're like, James, we're at Sears. We want to open up a credit card at Sears to buy a washer and dryer for the new house. I'm like, no, 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 no. Because once you do that, now we have to apply that payment against your income, and that could
Mhm.
change, right, stuff. So
Yeah.
I'm like, no, wait till after closing, and then we can, I get it. You're excited, you want to buy new furniture and appliances, but that could be
Wait,
a hit on
right.
your credit score. And if we're at that line of yes or no, right, it could make a difference.
Yeah, so now the appraisal comes back and the title and escrow company's doing all their thing in the background. The home insurance providers doing their thing. That's when I'm typically going to go and get with the buyer and say, let's do a walkthrough before we close. And that way, especially in a home that's being lived in by the seller during the listing period, we want to make sure that they moved out the things that they are supposed to move out, didn't damage the walls. And also, we want to make sure they didn't remove more than what we anticipated because in the listing agreement, typically there's going to either be a refrigerator, stove, microwave, washer, dryer that's included. And then once that happens, I think we get back to you. I don't know. Is there another cool down or 3 day period or whatever that has to happen before we get
We
documents in the escrow?
right, we clear conditions, right? All the
Okay.
conditions are cleared. Typically, there's milestones during the process. So like
Okay.
from day one, we're like, oh, congratulations on your offer being accepted. Then appraisal's been ordered, appraisal's back.
Mm-hmm.
And then we go through underwriting. Underwriter looks at all the information, clears the file, clear to close. That's the happy words of buying a
Clear to
home,
close.
right?
Okay.
So we get clear to close. Then, so when the initial disclosures go out, there's a loan estimate, and that has a breakdown of the fees and the payment and all that stuff, right? If the rate's
Okay.
locked or not. Then at the end, there's a closing disclosure. We call a CD, right? That
Mm-hmm.
goes out. Well, you go over that information, you sign it, and then there's a 3-day period. And that 3-day period is allow the client to review that information, ask questions, make sure they understand what's going on. Then the closing documents for signing
Mm-hmm.
go to escrow. And then that's
Okay.
when then there's another process of figuring out what day works, right? Because you can go to the CFPB
Mm-hmm.
website. That's what we follow. That's our regulator. Um, Consumer Financial Protection Bureau.
Protection. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and the rule is the lender to give the borrower 3 business days to thoroughly review the closing disclosure to enable them to compare the charges to the loan estimate and ensure the cost and loan program they are obtaining are as expected.
So
Like, you brought up a good point because when a contract, like you put in an offer and you have a closing date of 30 days, but I had a realtor ask me, is that 30 business days?
oh my gosh.
And I was
No.
like, no, calendar days, right? There's a
That's count.
difference, right?
Right.
Yeah. So she was trying to figure out Monday through Friday, 30 days of that, right? And I'm like, no, 30
Oh my
days
God.
from today, right? Not 30
Oh
business
my
days.
God.
Yeah.
Are you serious?
No,
That's
I,
terrible.
I looked at the text and I'm like, I
Huh?
was like, I'm pinching myself. Like, am I dreaming right now?
But
I
hey,
like your reaction though. You're like, no, really? So contracts are done 30 calendar days.
sure.
The CD is done business
So
days.
now we got the appraisal back and we done the walkthrough and now we're getting ready to close and you got the CD into the seller of the buyer, excuse me, to sign. And then those documents, is that usually electronic signing or is that
Yes.
in wet ink or no?
Yes.
Okay. So
Yes.
electronic.
So in general, a lot of the disclosures sent or anything that needs to be signed is all done electronically through
Okay.
whatever the system is.
Mm-hmm.
It's all we're trying to get technology friendly, right? So
Sure.
you got the mortgage app, then you have it's Snap Docs. So like even the initial disclosures, we have a secure website where
Mm.
it links up with everything. The client gets an email, hey, create a login and password. The initial disclosures are sent through that website, so it's their own password. So I've had clients call me, hey James, I forgot my login and password. I'm like, I can't help,
Sure.
there's a reason for that. And then the CD gets sent out. There's another
Okay.
alert, hi
Mm-hmm.
Mr. Mrs. CD is in the portal, go in and review and e-sign, right? Our closer with the lender sends those closing documents to escrow to have be signed. There is a way of now for the client to sign some of those closing documents electronically. And
Okay.
then you have to set up another appointment with a notary because there are some forms that do need to be. So then we get notification from title and escrow or the escrow company, hey, the clients have signed, that's been completed. Now it's all about when are we going to record and wire the funds to the appropriate parties. And
Then
then
the buyer can go buy appliances at Sears.
right. Closing dots get sent to escrow by the lender's closer. The
Right.
escrow agent then has the signing appointment happen, whether it's
Mm-hmm.
online, electronic signature, or ink, or all the above, right? Then they say, "Hey, the buyer is signed. We're ready." Right.
And then the lender sends money, right, to the
Then
escrow
the lender
department.
wires in our case, it the closer will release or will wire the funds to escrow, but they'll put a
Okay.
hold on it. Our closer typically sends that wire the day before. If
Okay.
it's like good to go, right? There's no hiccups or anything. And let's just say that happens and they go, yeah, you're authorized to release. And then escrow then disperses those funds to the seller, the third parties,
Mm-hmm.
the the
Commissions.
the commissions for the agents or whatnot, right? And then we're all good.
Mm-hmm.
If there's a escrow holdback, whoever that general contractor was, typically, then they get their money and everybody's all good. And then it goes back to you
Mm-hmm.
where because once you record, you legally own the home, right?
And I can give the keys to the buyer.
Right. So, we go through the process from, the beginning where you get mutual acceptance, you go through the process with the third parties, getting any conditions that are needed by the underwriter, and then we get it clear to close, closing docs go to escrow, the signing appointment set up, there's the signing that happens, they send those documents back. In the meantime, there's this other movement of the gears is getting the U-Haul truck or the moving truck, friends to schedule your friends to, go help you move and buying the pizza and the beer for that. So I kind of almost feel like the orchestra. I'm the conductor,
Mm-hmm.
like, telling the
Mm-hmm.
violins to play, telling the flutes, okay, now let's all play together, right? And then I'm like,
Yeah.
no, now I just want the violins or the trumpets to play, right? That's kind of like
Right.
how I feel
Oh
sometimes.
man. Well, that's good, man. And everybody's happy. And then what do? We go right back to the beginning with a new buyer and a new house, and it all starts all over again. That's
Yes.
a day. That's a day in our life.
Yes. So that's the part of that's the home buying process. Thanks for watching. If you guys have any questions, let us know. You can leave a comment below. We'll have our contact information in the description. Thanks again, James, for joining us.
Absolutely. And make sure you smash that subscribe button and hit the notification bell so you get all the updates from James
And James.